A month ago today, on a sunny summer's evening, fire and fury descended on a quiet English market town. In Tamworth, a protest outside a holiday inn housing asylum seekers spiralled into a siege following the misinformation that spread over the Southport attack. So, how did it happen? Why Tamworth? How much is social media to blame? And has the town recovered? I'm Mary Nightingale, and this is What You Need to Know. Hello and welcome to today's episode of What You Need to Know. I'm joined by our investigations editor Daniel Hewitt, who's been investigating the fallout of the Tamworth riots. And Daniel, let's take you back to the evening of August the 4th, and it was advertised as a demonstration, wasn't it, in Tamworth? But it quickly turned into a mob. Can you just remind viewers and listeners what happened?
Yeah, there was a protest was advertised on Facebook. This is all taking place, remember, in the wake of the awful events in Southport and then the awful events which became a riot in Southport. A Facebook post had been placed on Facebook saying we want to protest outside the Holiday Inn Express in Tamworth, which for a couple of years now has been housing those seeking asylum. We understand around 180 asylum seekers were in the hotel that night. The protest didn't last very long before, as you say, descended into a kind of hateful mob. A line of police were really up against it as they tried to get into the hotel, firstly with rocks, then fireworks, and then petrol bombs. In one incident, you see a group of men with a huge tree trunk running at a glass window, smashing successfully the window and then getting into the hotel. The police managed to push them back. This became, let's call it what it was, a kind of hateful mob, naked hate on display. Police worked very hard to stop them getting in, but in many ways it was a miracle they didn't, because at one point, from the pictures we've seen, they were really overrun by this mob.
I mean, the pictures were shocking, weren't they? They were absolutely, almost unbelievable. Now, since then, you've been talking to a whole range of people in Tamworth, some of whom were there during what took place, and some who've lived there their whole lives. What did they say to you? What was their impression of what happened?
Everyone we spoke to, everyone, condemned the violence. They were shocked by the level of violence that took place. The pictures we've shown on our TV screens, everyone will have seen by now. There isn't I'll be honest with you, that there was a sense that a protest had been coming. The level of violence they didn't expect at all, but there was a feeling in the town for some time that something was brewing, that the lack of communication, some concern, and we'll get into this as well, some misinformation online about the hotel, about those staying in the hotel, had been allowed to sort of spread across the town. And some people had hijacked that local concern up until that night, a peaceful concern about the hotel. It had been hijacked by hate and turned into this kind of violent mob. But speaking to people, there was this genuine sense that something was coming, and it would take an event to almost trigger it. Southport became the event, really, that triggered it. But the level of violence on display, every single person we spoke to could not believe it.
So explain a little bit more about, as you say, the Southport stabbings undoubtedly triggered something, didn't they? But there was a genuine feeling of grievance then within Tamworth.
A couple of years ago, the Holiday Inn Express, which is, to place into context, Tamworth's quite a small town, and kind of the heart of the town really is a leisure facility called the Snowdome. For full disclosure here, I grew up in the town down the road from Tamworth. I went to the Snowdome as a kid pretty much 3 or 4 times a year, birthday parties, school trips. It's the heart of the town. It's what Tamworth locally is really known for, the Snowdome Leisure Centre, for tobogganing, ski lessons, swimming, the lot. The hotel is right next to that leisure centre, and the hotel was very popular with locals. It was closed down, taken over by the Home Office, and for the last 2 years has been used to house asylum seekers. For some people, let's be straight, for some people is downright racism. They don't like the idea of asylum seekers in the town. For the vast majority, that is not the position. They just don't like the idea the hotel is no longer available to them. And they feel there was a lack of consultation, a lack of information, a lack of communication about the hotel, to the point where the newly elected Labour MP for the town, who came into office, first thing she said in her maiden speech was, the people of Tamworth want their hotel back. Clumsy language, which she's now apologised for, especially in the wake of what happened in Southport. But there was genuine this sense of grievance that they felt that their town was being used to house asylum seekers, and they had lost, as a result, their hotel, a popular hotel in the middle of the town, with this lack of communication. As I say, none of this excuses, explains what happened, but we found that bubbling under the surface in the months leading up to the attack.
Now, I know you spoke to a security guard, didn't you? A local guy called Wayne, who, when he heard about the riot, he actually headed down to it to try and help stop it. What did he tell you? Yeah,
so we met Wayne at a sports and social club. We spent a week in the town. We tried to speak to as many people as possible. We kind of stumbled across Wayne, really, playing darts with his friends, and he was talking about how he's a security guard. He'd been working locally on the night of the attack and had heard about the attacks, finished his shift and went down, ended up helping the police try to stop the rioters get inside. We then had a pretty frank conversation, not only about what he saw, but also what he felt about asylum seekers and immigration in the town. I think we can play a bit of that now. Were you surprised it happened in Tamworth?
With the amount of asylum seekers they've got, no. But the way I see it is people were just jumping on the bandwagon.
What is your view broadly on immigration?
Cut it. Look after our own before anybody else. The immigrants come in here and they're held more higher than guys that fought for the country. Sleeping rough on the streets. There's a couple in Tamworth that I know.
You really think that people who come here are getting a better deal than people who live here already?
100%. Yeah.
And in what way do you think that's happening? What evidence do you kind of have for that, do you think?
Just by what the governments have turned around and said. They get food, they get housing allowance, you name it.
Wayne speaks for, I think, quite a few people said what Wayne said, which is, and Wayne sort of sums up a view we found in the town, which is, on the one hand, absolutely appalled by the violence, to the point where he called them, I won't use the language, but pretty colourful language whenever he talked about them, idiots being the operative word, right, preceded often by other words. Jumping on the bandwagon, did everything he could to try and stop the rioters getting in, to the point where he was next to riot police being pelted with rocks. On the other hand, his view more broadly is that he believes that the town has been used to house asylum seekers and shouldn't be. But I think,
to the detriment of other residents, local residents.
And I think that conversation, which went on, and I had a long conversation with Wayne, there is a real, I think we can maybe get onto this later, a kind of misunderstanding about asylum seekers, about who they are, what they can do, what their rights are. And I think I took from this whole experience was there is a real lack of understanding, a real lack of communication in this town, in lots of towns in the country, over what asylum is, what the application process is like, who these people are, where they're coming from, what danger they faced, a lot of conspiracy knocking around. And Wayne sort of summarised a lot of that in that conversation. All
right, we use... Talking of migrants, you spoke to some of the asylum seekers, didn't you, who had been staying in that hotel from war-torn places like Sudan and Iraq and so on. What did they tell you?
They were absolutely traumatised by what they went through. No, they are no longer in Tamworth, they are living somewhere else. We went and met 3 of them, we spoke to them. We did not reveal their identities for obvious reasons, but they, in their words, have sort of fled danger and war in their own countries to come to Britain for safety. And often they come to Britain, they told us, because they believe Britain to be the most tolerant, accepting country that they could arrive at in Europe. Often that's the language also they speak. And so Britain, they felt, would be a place that would welcome them. The level of hostility they faced was, they could never, ever have imagined it. And they believed that night they were going to be attacked, and some believed they were going to die, when they saw the police were really up against it, when they saw the hotel had been breached, when people were running into the hotel. They genuinely felt their lives were in danger, and they felt they felt their lives were in danger, and the fear, I could see the fear in their eyes when I was speaking to them. They're still really traumatised by it, to the point where they're staying now, they just struggle to even leave the hotel they're staying in now, because they just are so conscious that they are going to be attacked or approached in the street.
You spoke to a charity, didn't you, Community Together, who support some of these people, and they spoke to you about what took place. What was their view? What did they say?
They have felt this rumbling. They've seen this rumbling, this tension kind of creeping in the last few months, and a guy called Lee, who runs the centre, was telling me how they've tried to do some outreach work in the community to try and kind of break down the barriers. Often I found that there's been a real dehumanisation of those seeking asylum. They're treated as like one homogenous block. There's a lot of misinformation, a lot of conspiracy over why they're here and what they can do. And that charity tried to do some work in the months and weeks leading up, but they started to see, I think, things online, and we'll talk about that in a moment, on social media creeping in, of people anger building around the use of the hotel. And they felt, and Lee, who runs the charity, feels that there is a view in the town that this group of people are in the hotel that Tamworth had before, and they are getting a pretty good life. They're in a hotel, they're getting 3 meals a day, being paid for by the government, and he was saying that is far from the truth. It's not a hotel as people imagine. It's often 3 or 4 to a room. They get £8 a week. They can't work. The food they get often is not great, and they have no choice over it. They can't leave Tamworth. They've been placed there by the government. But there's this perception that this group of people are getting something while people in the community in a cost of living crisis are really, really struggling. And that friction had been allowed to build up over the last few months.
Now, you mentioned social media, and that is undoubtedly, isn't it, a real source of some of what you're talking about, the misinformation, the rumours, and the kind of ugliness that started to grow. These online rumours have real-life consequences, don't they? So tell me more about that. How did they grow, and how did the platforms themselves stoke the violence further?
It's really interesting because spending a few days in Tamworth, people in conversation where we were at the park or in the market, the town centre, people kind of just naturally, organically bring up Facebook and things they saw on Facebook posts. That feels to me the place where there's a community page with tens of thousands of followers, and when you look at it, you see all sorts of posts. One will be about the Asylum hotel, the next one will be about, does anyone know a good dog groomer? It's a place like that. They talk about very trivial things and very big political things. And in those political posts, some people are posting pictures of men and saying, be careful, these men are hanging around the town. And then the comments will all...
Are they mostly men in the hotel?
Yes, they are mostly men in the hotel. And that's, again, something that's discussed in the town, why they're mostly men. The comments then will descend with no evidence whatsoever into these are men at the hotel, these are asylum seekers at the hotel. When there is no evidence these men are asylum seekers, there is no evidence they're even from Tamworth. And in one post in particular we found, which had hundreds and hundreds of shares, it was by far the most kind of popular, probably the wrong word, but the most viewed post. A woman who we actually tracked down and spoke to had posted a picture of these 3 men and claimed that these men had followed her teenage daughter around the town. I'm not questioning whether that happened or not, but in the comments below, vast majority were talking about how they are from the hotel, they are asylum seekers, I've seen them. The woman actually complained to the police about these 3 men. The police did an investigation. They found categorically the men were not even from Tamworth and they were not asylum seekers. But that post is still there. It happened in the weeks leading up to the riot. And if you speak to people about the riot, about the hotel, they'll bring up these Facebook posts which are not true. There's no evidence, the information is not there, but yet they stay there. And that kind of leads to that building up of tension. And what I found, say I said this earlier, coming away from this was, in this vacuum that's been created by a lack of communication around the housing, the policy of housing asylum seekers in hotels in the middle of town centres, the lack of consultation with locals, the lack of communication information, that vacuum is then filled with misinformation, sometimes myth, sometimes rumour, sometimes by bad actors who are trying to stoke tension. I think anything moving forward, any policy that takes a group of people from outside an area and puts them in an area, there has to be a lot more communication about who these people are, why they're here, what their rights are, what their relationship is with the government, what their relationship is with the local people. Because at the moment, no one is winning. No one is winning from this situation.
Well, here we are, a month after the riot. It's the 4th of September as we record this. And you've been back to Tamworth, haven't you? Went to a Tamworth FC football club. It's a big question, but what is the mood? How are people feeling there that you spoke to?
There's a real sense of unease. I think shame is a word we came across a lot. People are genuinely shamed that their town, which, look, let's be frank about this, Tamworth's not a town that comes up in the news very often. I'm sure some people, 20 minutes into this podcast will think, where is Tamworth? Well, it's in Staffordshire. It's a small town north of Birmingham. It's not particularly known for a great deal, other than the Snowdome, obviously, for people like me from Cannock. The fact that now the spotlight, the fact that the media, myself, producer, cameramen turn up and walk around the town asking questions because of a riot, it brings a real shame. They don't like the idea their town is now known for a riot that took place. The harsh reality is that riot is now a part of that town's story and a part of that town's history. I don't think there is a general mood. I think there's a definite question hanging in the air, which is what happens next, in particular with that hotel, because the hotel has been used for a couple of years to house those seeking asylum. Those who attacked the hotel that night had one thing in mind, which was to get those asylum seekers out of that hotel. Right now, that's happened. That's been successful, regardless of the arrests, and it's been more than 60 and people being charged. That hotel is no longer being used right now to house asylum seekers. If in the future the town is deemed to be too unsafe to house asylum seekers, that sends a pretty difficult message, because you've got a situation there where the rioters have got what they wanted. And I think there's going to be some difficult conversations in the town about what happens next when it comes to the use of that hotel, use of the town to house those seeking asylum. Because let's be honest, there are lots of people in that town who really don't want their hotel to be used to house people from outside, and there are some people in the town who are really welcome that hotel being used. I spoke to one lad called Dylan, he's 17, lovely guy, and he was saying he really liked the fact that his town was being used to house asylum seekers. He said, if that was me, I know they would take me in. I'm lucky enough not to be in that situation. I love the fact my town has been chosen and is being used in this way, and now I feel ashamed that this has happened because we've scared these people and they deserve better. And so there is definitely some difficult conversations taking place right now in that town.
I mean, is there in any sense that people have come to terms with it? Do they understand it? Could the same thing happen again?
I think, and I say this, I don't think we can repeat this enough. The violence that took place, the riot that took place, I think in lots of ways has nothing to do with any of this. I do think a lot of that was fueled just by kind of racism and hate, and by people who would look for an excuse to do something like this. This could have kind of been anything. They would have used whatever awful atrocity to kind of jump on the back of it. I think the question of whether it happens again, I think unlikely anytime soon, because a lot of those people have been arrested and some will have been and some will be prosecuted, I'm sure. But the idea, I think, of the role the town now plays moving forward in terms of housing asylum seekers is one that is hanging in the air, and I think is for everyone's safety is one that needs to be looked at very carefully.
Dan, thank you. Fascinating. And thank you for listening. For more on this, head over to our website where you can watch both of Dan's special investigations in full, and do have a look back through our other quick briefings on a range of headline topics to find out what you need to know. Until next time, thank you for listening.